Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz, and I have a fun shaker card for you today. I love this new die set. This came out with the birthday release in July. It's the You Take the Cake die set, and optionally, you can turn it into an adorable shaker. So here's the die set, and there's one piece that is the outline of the entire wedge of cake. And I'm just going to tape that onto my A2 panel right where I want my cake to be on my card. And when I pop that out, it leaves room for me to add some acetate in the back. I'm using rip and stick tape and I'm going all the way around the outside edge. We're on the back of the card. And I love this tape because it tears really easily. I just loop it around my hand and I let it roll around my wrist and I can quickly cover that area. I like that dry adhesive when working with acetate if I can, so that I don't have to worry about glue oozing out from behind it. I'll use the pokey end of my pickup stick from Trinity stamps to peel off the backing paper, and then I'll lay my acetate right down on top of it. There are a handful of pieces for this die, and this one is pretty skinny. If I thought about it ahead of time, I would have put a rip and stick sheet behind this one, but I didn't. And so here's what I do when I have really thin pieces. I put glue all over, dots or lines, doesn't really matter, and then I tap off the excess. I should have tapped this one off on like a piece of scratch paper just because the piece is so big, but it's habit for me to tap it on the back of my hand. It worked out in the end, but if you don't like glue on your hands, or if you don't like the feel of trying to get that glue off of your hand, then absolutely just use some scratch paper or a silicone mat. Then I'm going to piece in this little piece here. You could fill in the cake layers as well, right? This is the frosting, but I'm going to have white cake in the background and then my shaker bits. However, you could just piece those in if you wanted to focus on a different interactive element or no interactive element at all. In fact, this die set works out beautifully if you want to make a light up card where you blow out the candle. You can use the Pear Blossom Press candlelight for that. I know a bunch of us got to play with that at Paper Ganza. It was fantastic. This actually has wording in the die set for blow it out. So once I get those pink pieces pieced back in, I just glued them in there. I'm going to work on the shaker. On the back, I'm adding 1/8 inch wide foam strips. Mine are 3 millimeters thick because I like to give it lots of room to shake and move, but 2 millimeters would probably work. And I'm trying to make sure that all of my foam around the openings is touching. It's really, really important because I'm going to use Shaker Pop embellishments and they are really small. They will find their way through any little holes or gaps that I leave in that foam. But once I get the cake done, the rest of it is me just being picky. I really like a clean line around the outside edge, and then I'll fill in a little in the middle to make sure that I'm not going to have a saggy card base. I'm removing the backing paper really just on the bottom and around the shaker areas. Then I can start adding in my shaker bits. If you haven't played with Shaker Pop before, they're these tiny little beads. They've got just a little bit of weight to them. And this one is the Confetti Shaker Pop. It comes in a whole bunch of colors in here all mixed together. It looks like cake sprinkles. I love it so much. But I was looking at this going, oh my goodness, these are all going to end up in that adhesive. So I instead used this little scrap of white cardstock to cover up the adhesive on one side and slowly sort of add them in so they're going down the slope of the cardstock. I removed the backing paper of the foam tape because if I had done it after those shaker bits were in there, it sort of jostles the card and they would have ended up everywhere. I'd have been chasing them for days. And then once I get a few in, then I can kind of take inventory and see, do I want a little bit more? Am I happy with that? And then I'll use my pokey tool just to clear the few of them that landed on the adhesive away from the outside. I'm using a plain white piece of cardstock and layering that right behind the shaker. And I'm going to press really firmly all over that foam tape to make sure I have a really good seal. And you can see how well that moves. I love it so much. And I like using this scrap so I don't have to worry about lining up the full A2 perfectly as I'm finishing the shaker. I'm going to add a little bit of wet glue over the remaining foam tape and then over this cardstock, and then I'll add the whole thing onto my card base, and that gives me just a little bit of wiggle room before I squeeze the whole thing together. And you can see now I have my shaker on my card base, and it was pretty stress-free, which I love. So there are these 3 little dollops of frosting that are going to go on the back edge of our cake. But again, there's so many ways to dress this up or to change it. I love that actually the first piece we laid down, that skinny little piece, you could do that in black and it looks sort of cartoony. So cute. But I just glued together the 2 pieces of frosting, and those are going on the back of my card. And then I am going to work on this candle. So I cut one out from white and one from pink. And then I'm going to clip off the flame at the top from both at the same time. Then I will layer those onto a sort of backer piece. Basically, there's an outline for the candle, and then there's a piece you can drop on the inside to cut out the additional pieces. So this way, my flame has an outline of yellow, but the candle has an outline of pink. But I know they're going to line up perfectly because I clipped them or cut them at the same time. Then honestly, I thought I was going to just like use a marker or something to fill in every other white section of that candle, but I don't know. I didn't like that. I didn't like that it was going to end up being messier than I wanted. So instead, I cut out the drop-in piece from light pink, and I'll just puzzle piece that in. A bunch of them stayed in the die, which I love. So I'm just kind of poking it and trying to make sure they're in there as well as they can be. And I will flip this over onto the other candle. I have glue in all those little wells, and then I'll use my pokey tool. And this is like the easiest paper piecing you'll ever do. There are a few pieces that fell out, but I am so appreciative that those little stripes are not all the same size. In fact, they're significantly not the same size. So it's really easy to figure out which piece goes into which part of the candle. I added a little bit of glitter brush right up at the top of my candle. If I had planned better ahead of time, I would have done the shaker and the light up card at the same time, but next time. This is the Simply Sentimental Special Stamp and Die set. If you haven't seen these before, the Simply Sentimental sets give you one large word in the die set, but it's a bunch of different fonts and they're a really good size. Then the stamp set has the same different fonts for that large word and the same size, so you can use the shadow die to cut out the stamped version. But then they also have a whole bunch of sub-sentiments. So this one's going to say special delivery, and I am just stamping the word delivery. I didn't love it the first time, but that's fine. This somehow seemed easier than pulling out my MISTI. I'm lining it up fairly well on the bottom edge there of that cardstock, and I used a pigment ink because I tend to get a better impression that way of a foam mat. Under it, a mouse pad works equally well. Then I have special cut out of white, and then I have that shadow layer on black. I'll just tap off any of that excess glue. I feel like when you're working with a dark cardstock, any glue oozing out really shows up quite a bit as opposed to, say, on white, where a lot of times I don't notice it. I did keep the tittle. It stayed in the negative of the die cut, which was brilliant because it is quite small here. So I added my glue and put the dot on the eye. And then I was like, you know what? I think the word delivery should be cut out kind of wonky. I could have taken this to my trimmer or used a die to get it nice and tidy, but I just thought this was more whimsical and fun. I did want a black outline on this that would coordinate with the word special, however. So I added a little removable adhesive behind the word delivery, and I'll put that on some black cardstock, creating the margin I want at the bottom. And then I'll just use my scissors to try to match the other ones. Because it's sort of wonky, I feel far more comfortable using my scissors. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So I think if it had been a perfect rectangle, I would have been more concerned about the lines being perfectly straight. Then I'll peel it off and use wet glue to add that back on there. I like removable at first in case I don't do a very good job. Then I can just add it onto a different part of my black cardstock and try again. So I'm adding on the word special and delivery using some wet glue. There's already a fair bit of dimension because I used 3mm foam on this card. But if I hadn't, I might have popped those up a little bit. And then I'll put my candle on top of my cake. I wanted some little sprinkles on top of my cake as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add little dots of glue and add some of those shaker pop bits onto the top. Are you team orange or team purple? Can I tell you I picked around most of the orange ones when I was putting them on top? I'm sorry, team orange. Let me know in the comments what team you're on. And then, because I can't leave well enough alone, I was looking at the background going, I didn't ink blend, I didn't stencil anything. So I added a mixture of Poolside and bubblegum embellishments. That finishes our card for today. My friends, this is one of my favorite shakers maybe ever, and it's the shaker pop that does it for me. You'll have to let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the Trinity channel so you don't miss out on more inspiration, and I will see you next time.